Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Mona Herbert. We are very pleased to have you, since normally you are based in Uganda.
Yes.
And just because you are passing by Brussels to discuss population and development issues that we have the privilege of having you with us. You also work a lot, of course, in your country and in the region. You work for the German Foundation for World Population in Uganda. So we would like to benefit of your views, what is involved in population in Uganda and in the region, what are the main issues. And you work also especially on youth education, which we think is very critical.
Yeah.
So if you could just tell us a bit more on the challenges involved.
Okay. With regard to population issues, particularly in Uganda, and of course which is then reflective of the region, I would say that the challenges range. I mean, when you start off with education, which earlier on in the meeting I said the government of Uganda with donors, they've done a tremendous job to ensure that there is universal primary education. Now there is universal secondary education. Yes, they've taken that direction and that route, but it has burdens. Because if you look at the current population trends, more than almost 80% of the total population of 30 million in Uganda are young people below the age of 30. It's really a burden, it's a constraint. So even when you talk about access to education, you talk about the teacher to pupil ratio, it's already overwhelming. And certainly they are working in that direction to make it better. But at the moment, it would have a constraint that if you look at education standards, they would be constrained, there would be issues to do with that. Then later on, to look at the infrastructure setup. Because with so many children and with so many young people, the infrastructure must really be in place, which is not necessarily the case. So in Uganda, you would be looking at a situation whereby it's as if someone woke up yesterday and we realize we have so many young people. They all, as a mandate, as an MDG, universal access to education, to primary education, they all have to be in school. And hey, what about these classrooms? What about the infrastructure? Later on, even when you talk about disabled children, have we catered for their needs? And that's when we go into issues of rights. And that alone can talk a lot about the population versus the needs of the people. Then when you cross on to health, and particularly you can talk about reproductive health, I can tell you that in Uganda, up until maybe recently when we've seen a few changes, there has only been one center which for us we qualify by all standards to offer youth-friendly services, where young people feel free to go and access counseling, to do HIV testing, to access services for reproductive health. Only one, it's Naguru Teenage Center. And of course, as development partners, even as government, they're trying to use this as a model to also replicate and find other centers. But that's just one center in the middle of the city, and young people are spread all over the country. Majority of the young people are in rural areas. So you would have their hotline of a certain young person somewhere in the rural area wanting to consult, wanting to get a service. Maybe they have a problem, a health problem, but one, they don't have the means to commute to come to this health center to seek advice. And two, if they are referred to their own health center which is nearby, when they go there, either they won't get the services that they are looking for, or they won't even have access to the medicines later on, or probably they'll find the health center in no means to support them, that it's not youth friendly and it's not going to kind of attend to the needs they have. So in terms of health, young people really have a lot. You could talk about unmet family planning for 15 to 19 years, which is 33.8%. You can talk about teenage pregnancy, which is 25% for young girls under 18. So many problems. And these speak a lot for Uganda, but it's the same thing that's reflective of the region as well. Yes.
And lastly, you have an extensive experience and you work on all the advocacy and public relations campaigns.
Yeah.
So in that case, it involves, of course, working with the media. So according to you, what is the role that media can play on population and development?
Okay. It's only until recently that actually, for starters, media has really taken on a significant role on issues of population and development. Why do I say a significant role? Because in Uganda, the media, I think, was operating in the past, in the recent past. They've only been operating in the sense that they don't particularly regard developmental issues to be kind of prime news, which is pretty fine. But we felt as development partners that it's important for media to begin regarding these issues, kind of to put the bits together. So we began working with them slowly, and eventually, those who really got the gist of the matter to understand the connection between development and the responsibility of media, they began to use their kind of their background and their ability as media people to really play a developmental role. So for starters, media has a responsibility to also internally kind of spread the information and induct others so that they can come on board. But secondly, and most importantly, when we talk about development issues, and maybe that's one of the key issues that I always refer to when we say development partners, then government policies and the like, there is always a key question. What does all this mean to the people at the grassroots, the beneficiaries? How do they play their role, and how do they make sense of these complicated, diverse policies that we are talking about? And media has an advantage in this regard because media can get all this complex information, work with it, and come up with communication that makes sense to people at the grassroots. And the advantage being that in Uganda, DSW only has a limited few members of staff who can't touch the entire country. Media can do that because they have radio, they have papers, and they can really play a positive role. So one of the key issues that I would point on specifically is that media can play a role to inform, sensitize, but at the same time in Uganda, we've now all appreciated that actually media defines an agenda, or it can drive an agenda. So increasingly, as they become development partners, because that's how we love now to refer to them in Uganda as, these development partners can really bring all these key issues on the table, and then everyone, including people at the grassroots as beneficiaries, to begin appreciating them and to put their voice to opinions to these matters and also become participants in the process.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Thank you.